Hey everyone, here we are, the end of 2020, and what a year it has been. I hope you're doing well, and if you're like me, you're looking forward to 2021 and a vaccine and kind of getting back to normal, at least hopefully, after a really long year. As is kind of the tradition around here, I just want to share a bit of an update with you in the form of a video where you actually get to see me. I think it's fun to do these so you can see me and not just hear my voice and not just look at the photos I take, but kind of connect a little bit more and see that there is a real person behind all of these voiceover photos that you've been looking at for the whole year. So what's to report? Good question. First, if you like Weekly 50, consider sharing it with others. I'm always happy to have more readers and more YouTube subscribers, and if you know anyone who's interested in photography and wants to learn a bit more, share with them a link to my website or my blog or the YouTube channel. I guess website and blog is kind of the same thing. Or if you just happen to like one of my photos, share it on social media. You see a lot of YouTubers who say, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button and all that. I feel like that's kind of self-serving because that makes it about me. I want to make it about you and about your friends, your family, people you know who want to learn more about photography, especially at this time of year. A lot of people are getting cameras for Christmas, and it's a great time to share with them some of the things that might help them learn about photography, maybe that you've learned on Weekly 50. So send them a video, send them a link to my channel, send them a link to my blog, and hopefully it's the rising tide that lifts all boats. As we all collectively learn more about photography, we'll all become more engaged with photography and interested in it as an art form. Next, thank you for another great year. In March of 2021, that will mark 8 years of Weekly 50. 8 years! As I record this, I've got about 400 photos with audio commentary, and I wouldn't be doing this without you. Yes, I do this kind of for my own personal edification. I wouldn't care if I had 0 readers and 0 subscribers. I would still do this. And in fact, I did that for a long time. But it's really fun seeing the comments that you leave and the questions that you ask, both on the blog and on YouTube. And I feel like that's how we all learn and grow from each other. And we get better collectively the more we engage with Weekly 50 and just photography in general. So thank you so much to everyone who's been a part of this. And I'm not going anywhere. We're going to keep this up as long as I can. And so hopefully we will continue learning and growing together. So 2020, throughout this year, I kind of rediscovered the joy of shooting with a 50mm lens. For a while there in 2019, I shot a lot of my Weekly 50 photos with my Fuji X100F, and 2020 was kind of a return to basics. Most of my photos this year were shot on the same 50mm lens that I got in spring 2012, and many were even taken on my old D7100 camera. It was just kind of fun to rediscover the joys of that lens and that camera. And if you're not sure where to start with photography, that 50mm lens and an old camera like a D7100, which you can find for just a couple $100 used, it's a great place to start. And the reason I say D7100 is you have those dual control dials, whereas your lower end cameras, you only have one control dial. It makes it a little trickier to learn things like controlling aperture and shutter speed separately. In any case, I really enjoyed going back to the basics, so to speak, with that old lens and that old camera to take some really good photos that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I hope you did too. It was fun to kind of rediscover the joy of that lens, and a side benefit that I realized in 2020 that I never did before, I used live view a lot more than I ever have. Now, on a mirrorless camera, you're in live view all the time, but on a DSLR, you switch between that optical viewfinder at top and then the live view on the back, and over the years, I've just sort of seen live view as kind of a silly gimmick, not really have much of a point on a DSLR. But this year, I found that that was not the case. So I learned something new this year. I found myself using live view way more than I ever did before to compose shots where the level of background blur was particularly important. I have several shots, particularly in the past couple months here, where there's an object in the foreground, like a flower or a leaf, and then a blurry background. And the key to those was live view. Live view on a DSLR is not great for moving subjects, but for a still subject where you really want to compose the whole scene and not just the subject, but everything in there, it's really important to be able to get a sense for how all the light is playing around with the different elements of the scene, especially at large apertures. And the key to that is live view. It helped me get a sense of how the background blur would affect the total composition, especially the spots of light in the background. I still like my traditional DSLRs with the optical viewfinder, but this experience has made me appreciate the new mirrorless cameras. Like in Nikon, you got the Z6, the Z7, the Z5. There's mirrorless, Canon, Sony, Panasonic. The mirrorless stuff is looking a lot more appealing now that I've done a lot more live view. And who knows, maybe I'll get one someday. Maybe not. I don't know. I like my DSLRs. Nothing wrong with them. Mirrorless is cool too. Whatever gets you the shot. But I found that using live view on DSLR allowed me to get the shot that I couldn't have gotten otherwise. So I don't know. Maybe I'll get one. I don't know. Anyway, I also thought I'd start a new tradition with these updates at the end of the year. I want to share with you my top 3 photos of the year in no particular order. Not necessarily the award-winning, but just the photos that stood out to me for whatever reasons. And I'm not going to go into great detail on each one since I've already done that in the photos themselves, but I just kind of want to review the top 3 photos from this past year. Number 3. We'll start at the back and work our way forward. Number 3 is Papa Cardinal. This is from July 8th. And the reason I like this photo so much is it was so challenging to take and so rewarding when I finally got it. I've never had an experience before where I stood in one place, hardly moving for such a long time to get one photo. In this case, I think I shot like 300 pictures. And this one stood out to me the most of all the pictures that I took of this cardinal. And it was right in my own backyard. It's not like I had to travel to some exotic location, but it was just really interesting to take that photo. And it taught me a lot about using my gear, about patience, about light, about where I want to position myself and my subject. So that photo, my third favorite or third most interesting photo for me for the past year. My second would be, or the second place, I guess, would be Blast Off. This is from September 30th. And what I like about this was it was an unconventional use of lighting. Everything in here is backlit, which is not something that I normally do. I usually try and take photos that are front lit, but this one, I made the intentional choice to backlight my subject, and I didn't really know how it would turn out because this huge explosion of water and air was something I couldn't really predict, but I was super pleased with how it turned out. And it was also a fun way to use my D500, which has a 10 frame per second burst, which, at the time that camera came out, that was really fast. Now a lot of cameras do 10 or 12 or more frames per second, but for me, it was pretty cool to get to use that. And an 8,000th of a second shutter speed. You don't find that combination on a lot of cameras where you have such a fast burst and such a fast shutter speed, but that D500 has it because the D500 is an absolute beast. And I really enjoyed getting the chance to use it in something like this. So that blast off photo was a lot of fun to take. Finally, my number 1 photo, the most standout photo to me of the past year, taking flight. This is from August 12th. And what made this photo so special for me was the confluence of so many things, most of them that I could not predict. I had no intention of taking a photo. I was driving down the interstate in the middle of Iowa, and I happened to see the sunset. I happened to see the clouds. I happened to see these turbines. There happened to be an off-ramp on the interstate, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have the ideal combination of lighting conditions and everything else, but you can't get off the road to take the photo. And all of that lined up, and I'm taking photos, and it wasn't even that many pictures, but I took maybe a dozen or so. Then this flock of birds flew by. I could have never predicted or planned any of this. And it was such a cool photo to be able to take completely by accident with those birds flying through. And I don't know when I'll get to do another shot like this. So that's my number 1 photo from the past year, with an honorable mention to the photo Illusion from March 4th. This was taken in Columbia, Missouri. And I guess what makes this photo special is I see this tree every time we visit Columbia around Christmas time to see family, but I've never tried taking a long exposure of this with the wind moving like that. And it was a cool picture to take, and a different way of looking at this tree, which by itself is a really cool tree to see. But then to see it in a different way with the branches swaying back and forth, it was just really fun to take that photo. As for 2021, what lies ahead for the future? I'm glad you asked. I'd like to experiment more specifically with long exposure photography. I have a 3-stop ND filter built into my X100F and some screw-on filters for a 35mm lens that I don't really use that often. I just ordered a 10-stop ND filter for my 50mm lens, and I'm really excited to try this out. A little while ago, I went with my buddy Ryan, who is the same Ryan I've mentioned from time to time here on Weekly 50. He helped me get into photography way back years ago. I went with Ryan to shoot some long exposures on the Oklahoma State University campus, and man, I had such a fun time doing that. I really want to get more into long exposure photography, and so you'll be seeing some of the photos that I shot with Ryan the next few weeks, and I really need to up my game. So I ordered a $50 ND, I think it was, well, it's a 10-stop ND filter. I don't know if they call it an ND3, but I ordered a 10-stop ND filter for my 50mm lens, and I can't wait to try it out. My wife calls it a very dark circle. Yes, it is, and it does really cool things. So I'm really excited to take that out and try more long exposure photography, even though 50mm is not a very wide angle to shoot long exposures. I want to try it anyway and see what happens. So that's my goal for 2021. Last year, I talked about making better use of the gear I have, which I certainly did in 2020. And in 2021, I'm looking at one specific technique, long exposure photography. Who knows? Maybe it'll be great. Maybe I won't try too much. I don't know. But that's what I'm going to try and do in 2021. I hope your 2020 is ending on a positive note despite the challenges of the past 12 months. There's a lot to be hopeful for and a lot to look forward to in 2021. I'm excited for what the future holds, and I'm so glad to have you with me on this Weekly 50 journey. Thank you, God bless you, and I'll see you around.